Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this imminent Rosh Chodesh in just an hour and a bit. We're very fortunate to be joined tonight for our Women Teaching Torah on Rosh Chodesh by Shoshana Helfenbaum to talk to us on the topic of Jewish healing and the month of Iyar, wisdom for health and well-being. Shoshana focuses, as most of us know, on bringing joy, compassion, and evidence-based practice to healthcare education, to research, psychotherapy, and coaching. She's an innovator at heart with a passion for transforming the tension and distress of caregiving and health challenges into positive momentum. She's currently a consultant, a psychotherapist in private practice, and a team educator leading special projects for the Ontario Centers for Learning, Research, and Innovation in Long-Term Care at Baycrest, and is currently talking to us from a conference at Niagara Falls. Thank you, Shoshana, so much for joining us and teaching us. And I'm going to mute myself and hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to share with you tonight. I think that this is an opportunity for us to have a conversation. That's what I think about this evening. And for those of you who will be learning with us later in retrospect, I'm posting a question now, which is, what is a positive difference you would like to get out of this opportunity to learn together about Jewish healing? So if you want to post in the chat an idea that you have, maybe an interest you have, something that would be on this topic. Just give you a couple of minutes to put it down. And I'll also invite all of you to look up the source sheet, which I'm posting in the chat now. It's a Google Doc that will give you the outline for this evening and some sources that I put together. Okay, so we have an answer from Jason to have a proactive or preventative approach to wellness. That is definitely something that is spoken about by the Rambam, for sure, by many of the sages who we will talk about tonight. How about the rest of you? How Jewish healing may be different from other kinds of healing? That's an interesting question. And I think that I'm not going to do a full comparison, but I can certainly highlight the strengths of it and what it adds, the value add. Maybe we can talk that way. So much of our tradition is based on trauma. How can we keep that from influencing our modern lives? So I think from that question, I'm hearing, is it that the tradition is based in trauma, or that we have intergenerational trauma that colors how we live and our level of well-being? Could I have some clarification on that idea?
Sure. Can I do it out loud? Is that okay?
Yes, please.
I mean, I think when I think about a lot of the mitzvot that we have, and especially at this time of year when we just came out of Yom HaShoah, heading into Yom HaZikaron, I don't know that it's intergenerational, but like, how many of our Megillot are about traumatic experiences, right? How many of our mitzvot are based on, remember how you were treated in Egypt? And that is a pretty traumatic experience. And I'm just wondering, in the modern era, is that a healthy way to base your identity, a healthy way to live your life, always reflecting back on your trauma?
Such an excellent question. And the reason that I find that question so important to think about is because of the new science around the importance of being future focused. And that is also in so much of our healing tradition. And until I researched Jewish healing, it's not something you hear about every day. It's very thick in our tradition, but you don't hear about it, do you? It's not something we talk about often. Yeah. Okay, so we have what is different about Jewish healing. Welcome, Zahava. And I think we have a question in the chat for those of you joining a little bit later. And I think you're all heroes for getting here on a Thursday night, especially the moms and dads in the room. There's a source sheet there that is an outline. And I posted a question before, which is, what is it that we can do tonight together that would make a positive difference for you? So far, we've heard like to think about the proactive or preventative approach to wellness and perhaps the role it plays in Jewish healing. How is Jewish healing different from other kinds of healing? And let's see if I can use your language, Jonathan, that with so much of a focus on traumatic incidents and commandments or directives to remember those things, is that something that modern science or what we know now about how traumatic things affect the psyche, should we have that kind of focus back there in terms of how we shape our identity? Is that some of the language that you use? Okay. All right, so I would invite if anybody else has something that they want to add, please go ahead and we're going to start. I would invite you to open the link, please, to, and I'm going to actually share it on the screen for those of you who it's easier for me to do that for you. I don't want to make us too tiny so that we miss being together. Okay, so you can see this. So a word on the month of Iyar itself is a month that's traditionally known to be imbued with healing. Each month of the year actually has a special koach or a special ability that is stronger than others and is an appointed time, like the seasons, like the holidays. And Iyar is known for its time as a time for healing. And the actual letters of Iyar, which are Aleph, stand for Ani. Yud and Yud stand for Hashem, Yud Ke Vav Ke. And Rofecha is Resh. So Iyar is Ani Hashem Rofecha. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to take an overview. I think this is very small. 1 second. I'm going to make this bigger. There we go. We're going to take an overview of the vast topic of Jewish healing and learn what our sages have to say. What do some modern Jewish thinkers suggest as an integration of ancient and modern wisdom in health and healing? And we're going to do that by looking at some sources and do a little bit of reflection on what resonates most with us and those sources that can guide us personally toward healing. Because I have an agenda for tonight, which is that the things we look at should be personally meaningful for you and support your own well-being and healing. And then we're going to discover a few leading practices in health and wellness today that actually incorporate the advice of our sages. And then we are going to try some of those practices. Okay. So, Mr. Parker, I wonder, given what's going on, maybe there are some people who can participate. How many of you can actually be in a small group discussion right now? I don't think Tehila can because she's in the library.
Shoshana, I think
Yes.
when they set up this account, it wasn't enabled for breakout rooms because I've clicked on literally every possible place, and there's nothing for
Okay.
breakout rooms.
No worries at all. Hi
My
and welcome,
apologies.
Dahlia. No. Welcome, Dahlia.
Thanks.
Okay, so what we're doing then, let me go through some of these sources. Well, I guess the next question is, can everybody click and open this source sheet for themselves? So I'm just going to, Dahlia Free, I'm going to put it in the chat again, so you'll have it.
Thank you.
My pleasure. What do you recommend, Mr. Parker? Should I actually scroll through these and have people note for themselves if there's something specifically important for them or that resonates with them? Or should I give people a few minutes to open this for themselves and reflect? It's kind of hard to gauge right now.
So how many of the sources do you want them read through? Just part one, like the Chumash and Talmud sources?
Yeah.
And the commentators as well? I mean, yeah, I guess we could take a short pause and people can read through the sources together and discuss them and think about them. Because it looks like it's a lot to read out loud.
Okay. All right, and I see Ahuva, welcome.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, did Ahuva join after Dahlia that I should repost the source sheet again for her? Not sure. Ahuva,
Yeah, I
do you
think so.
have?
Can you repost it? Thank you.
Oh, with pleasure and welcome.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so I think if everybody has a look at it, what I'm interested in is what are some of the sources? I think we're talking specifically about the second and third page in this sheet. Part 1, it says a 20,000-foot view of selected sources. So this is where you would read until the end of part 1. Just have a look, I'm sorry, and see if there's something here that is specifically resonant for you or something that you learned that you didn't know. And for somebody who can't get the source sheet, I'm just going to show different sources.
If I could chime in, I'm staying off camera because I'm not camera ready this evening.
Yes.
But I'm interested in the interchange between different players here. So at the bottom of page 2, you have a source from Brachot that says, when Rav Chia bar Abba was sick, Rabbi Yochanan stretched out his hand to him and healed him, and Rabbi Yochanan did the same to Rav Eliezer. When Rabbi Yochanan became ill, he could not heal himself because a prisoner cannot release himself from prison. But Rabbi Hanina came to him, stretched out his hand, and healed him. So the implication is that we need each other somehow, and that it's not always necessarily an individual special healing gifts, but something about the interchange with another person that's powerful. But looking farther down, I'm seeing comments on healing through prayer, and the Rambam talking about one not healing if you don't have trust that it is God who heals and binds up wounds. And I'm wondering if there's a way in which we're supposed to see God as the other player in that equation, right? How much do you need another person? Can it be just you and God in a private duality? What roles are our different entities playing in this healing process?
Thank you, Zahava. It's a really, really deep question. And I don't mean deep like cool, though it is cool. I mean deep because there's so many layers to it. Each person has their own personal relationship with God. And the healing starts at the very beginning. The healing begins with making micro decisions about how you care for your health. It means, but everybody has a certain blind spot. Everyone does. There are people who cannot see their shortcomings in one area. but they're very aware of what they need to do in another area. There's people who know exactly what to do and cannot, I'm going to say me, I can put myself in all of these camps, right? I may not know exactly what I need to do, or I may know everything that I'm supposed to do, but not necessarily implement it. And all of this path, Jewish healing, is a way of living to recalibrate, refocus. And in the times when illness makes a person less able to think, and it affects energy, like vitality, literally the ability to think for oneself, you can find yourself, and I can find myself in a prison of depression. And I will, and at that point in time, you need another person. And you always need to surround yourself with people who are a good influence, right? So it's common sense, like it's not something so far-fetched to understand. The same way we need people, we need one another in all other aspects of our life to be intellectually stimulated, to have emotional nurturing. We also need other people for wellness. There can come a time when a person becomes so despondent that they cannot. I mean, think of somebody who's unconscious. Think of somebody who is unable to speak, someone who's very sick with a virus. It's not hard to imagine those situations, unfortunately. That's when a different person who has more wellness can have an increasingly important role to play in that what's being portrayed. So those are some comments I can offer. I want to know if, first of all, I'm going to stop sharing the screen so I can hear from everybody else. And please feel free to come off of mute. What do you think the interplay is between the relationship you have to God, the relationship you have to yourself, and the relationship that other people have to you when it comes to healing and well-being?
It's interesting what you're saying, because, you know, I think from a Jewish perspective, on one hand, there's a distinction between Ben Adam Lamakom, Ben Adam L'Chavero, and yet they are blurred, right? Like there's this cold thing of, for example, Kibud Av Va'em is considered to be Ben Adam Lamakom, but also Ben Adam L'Chavero, but also Ben Adam Lamakom. And it just occurred to me now, it's interesting, I don't remember which study it was, but they did a longevity study, and one of the, I think it was the one first or second top factor that determined longevity was the strength of your social network and your sense of relevance within a social network. So it's really interesting that this thought has been brought up of the importance of having that around you.
Yeah, that's right.
I also wanted to add, I think you have this wonderful source sheet with so many sources, and I feel like they also touch on this topic in different ways, but it's kind of hard to digest it all at once. I want to hear some of your thoughts on like why these sources spoke to you. And I want to be a part of that journey.
Well, I can tell you that there were, of course, many, many sources. I chose the ones that highlighted our interaction, our role in health and wellness as an active agent. And it's interesting, Zahava, that you brought up the one that says that the person couldn't help themselves. In Tehillim, King David said, "You reverse my illness." And the word that he used, I think, was afachta. I think that's the word, which literally means I was inside out. Like you use the same word for a piece of clothing that's inside out. It's a person becomes reversed, becomes some kind of twisted and inaccessible version of themselves at a certain point. And that's when our role in healing one another is much more aggressive, where we reach in to do something. And I know that I had a personal experience several times where I would get to a certain point where I felt too weak to do something for myself. And that's when I would ask for help in different kinds of ways, in different experiences of illness. So that's the answer to your question, Tehillah, that it has to do with showing us something about what we can do to take an active role. And here's the thing about Jewish healing that may or may not be different, and this is to address Morris and Jill's question. We are active roles in our healing. Yes, we are active agents in our healing in Judaism. We are not passive whatsoever. And the healing itself, and we have two sources for this, that it says both Chizkiyahu HaMelech, so King Chizkiyahu, had possession of a book of remedies that detailed the remedy for every illness in the world. And it was tradition that it was handed down from the beginning of time, and it's written about in the Talmud, and he decided to get rid of it. And he said that it was because people were not turning to God. It affected their ability to be in relationship with God, because having something that they needed in terms of health was such a powerful promoter of that interaction. The same thing happened with Rabbi Nachman. We don't have a copy of this, but there was an Aleph Beit book that had a section of many different types of teachings from him. And there was teachings on Shalom Bayit and teachings on prayer and teachings on different things that had 100 different recommendations. The one on healing has a handful. I think it's under 5 of them. And when he was asked by Rab Nassan, the person who helped him bring his teachings into the world, similar to Rabbi Chaim Vital and the Ari HaKadosh, he told him that he burned it all because anybody who had access to the remedies in the world stopped talking to God. So there is such a thing that healing is not being devoid of illness. It's being successful in a journey of self-actualization, and specifically of being the best version of yourself that you can be, closest to your role in life that was designed for you to bring you joy, to bring you purpose, and to do that for yourself and the entire Jewish people and the entire world. So when the idea is that actually we're aiming in the wrong direction if we just try to reverse symptoms and stop there. So there's an encouragement to be active agents in being well, for the purpose of being able to carry out this higher level of what it is that we need to do. So if we let's tie this together with
Morris has a question.
Morris, please go ahead. Thank you, Dahlia.
Comment actually that always struck me when we say the prayer.
Can you get a bit closer to the computer? Thank you.
Your examples that you gave, your sources, reminded me of something that I always found interesting. When we say the prayer for healing, we begin with refuat hanefesh.
Yes,
You don't begin with refuat haguf.
that's
As
right.
if it's a prerequisite for refuat haguf. That's all I just wanted to mention, because that was one of the things that wasn't in your sources.
That's correct. Yeah, it's not there. And in fact, there's an entire book that was put out by the Breslov Research Institute that was written by Chaim Kramer and also heavily written by Rabbi Avram Sutton, called Anatomy of the Soul. It actually details every single system in the body, the reproductive system, the respiratory system, the nervous system, whatever else it may be, and how the teaching being that, I mean, it's drawing from many sources. It happens to have been published through the Breslov Research Institute, but it draws from many, many sources. that we are actually illuminated, like the electrical cord, as it were, right? The source of the illumination or the enlivening is coming from our neshama. It's coming from God into us, and it enervates according to 248 positive commandments, have to do with the limbs, and 365 negative commandments have to do with the sinews and the vessels. And there's so many different teachings, but there's very specific commandments, usually in parallel with the enervation and the health of different body parts. So I didn't go into it in this talk, but I highly recommend that anyone is interested, let me know, and I will give you more to look at. That's, in my mind, completely fascinating.
Yeah.
And there's specific recommendations for specific parts of the body having to do with mitzvot.
Just a personal anecdote, and many of you may know I had a stroke this last summer. And I was very despondent afterwards. And the doctors came in and said, look, we have to get rid of this. You're not going to get better if you remain depressed. Said, you may as well not be here for rehabilitation. We can't do anything with you. And so it again picks up on your theme in all the sources that you mentioned, or at least one of your themes.
Thank you. There's a very humble man by the name of Rabbi Avram Greenbaum, who you may or may not have heard. He used to be a BBC commentator back in the day and became a Breslover himself. And he wrote a book called The Wings of the Sun on Jewish healing and across different sources. And he says we have to be very humble in talking about healing because we all come to it with a certain paradigm. No matter who we are, we arrive with a paradigm. And the paradigm is not usually the same as what Jewish healing has to say, right? We're used to particular types of medicine informing what it is that we say or do. And Jewish healing is definitely not against medicine. I want to be clear about that. But the role, again, Zahava, you're absolutely right. The role of the doctor is as an instrument of God when a person has things in the right order. So I actually think it's time, if I may, I know I haven't addressed your comment yet, Mr. Parker, because it comes in the next section. So I'm parking lotting it because what he asked is, does it help our identity? Does it help our health to have so many of our mitzvahs focused backward on remembering negative things that happened or traumatic events that happened? And that fits directly with what you were saying, Morris, about the importance of joy. Delia, I want to know if any of this is resonating with you, because we know you're here, but we haven't heard from you yet. What are you picking up on this conversation? And you too, Ahuva, and if you prefer not to talk about it, you're welcome to just write something in the chat or say, well, not now, anything you like.
Well, I just know that I was a very depressed person. This is, and when I started getting involved in the Chesed committee, people thought I was doing it because, I was trying to get mitzvah points up in heaven or something. I don't know. I was doing it for myself. It healed me. I went from being a very depressed person to being up, and every time we had a program or we did something nice, or we were successful with sending out mishloach manot or whatever we did, I felt healed. So that's where I see a connection between doing a mitzvah and healing. And some people think that you do it to sort of collect boxes and points. So when you go up to heaven one day, somebody up there has got this book, it's what you're taught in school. And, with your merits and demerits, which I think is, a lot of baloney. So in my opinion, I don't think you do it for the next world. That's why, that's my only observation.
Certainly not only for the next world.
I don't think I do it at all for the next world, not even only. I do it for this world. It's the only world I know. It's the only
Yes,
ones I can count on.
yes.
And I do know that when I do certain things, I do know that keeping Shabbos, gives me a certain tranquility, settles me for the week. Gives me goals that I can set, that have to get things done by Shabbos. Gives me deadlines, especially since I'm retired now. So I think that, there are biological impacts to doing positive mitzvahs. I have a big problem, like Jonathan said, with remembering terrible things and what impact that has on us. So the reason I was smiling is because what Jonathan said really resonated with me. I do not like this whole Holocaust Remembrance Week. I find it very disturbing. I never go to the programs, ever. I don't see, I mean, I know about it. I learned about it. I don't need to hear about it every year. It's not a mitzvah in the Torah like Yetziat Mitzrayim, where I have to go through it every time. Anyway.
Thank you, Dahlia. So what I'm hearing loud and clear is that what Mr. Parker said, what you're saying, what Morris said, is that you have a lived experience of the state of your body and your mind influencing your health. And not only that, but of the influence of how you observe Judaism and the component behaviors and actions you take also having an impact on your body and your mind and your well-being. So they're connected. So I'm going to take a second now and bring up this source sheet one more time, because I want to go down and see a couple more things in here. I don't know why.
While you're bringing it up, can you make another comment?
Of course, please.
So there's on the topic of the trauma, particularly around this time of year, there's been a concerted effort in contemporary Israeli culture to change the week that spans Yom HaShoah through Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. They now call it Shavua Shel Todah, that it's a week for gratitude and a week for being thankful, to try to reframe, well, there was this traumatic experience of the Holocaust, where there's this ongoing traumatic experience of our sons and daughters going to war. But what can we find within this world full of trauma to be grateful for, to be thankful for? And it's a contemporary initiative in Israel, looking at this 1 week, trying to find things to be happy for, to change this time of sorrow into a time of at least positive reflection.
That is
know
based.
about that.
That is based in science. That is completely based in science. And I'm so glad you said that. I, ladies and gentlemen, I did not set him up to say that. You're going to see why. Okay. So I'm going to, in the interest of time, you guys can always look at this later. But here's what the Rambam has to say. That cheerfulness is the physician's primary job. And a person must be relieved of spiritual and psychological forces that cause anxiety. It's the basis. When it says the first principle, it's not only chronological, but the underpinning factor. The Baal Shem Tov, do you see this? When a person's body is sick, his soul is also weakened, so it can go in the opposite direction. And there are people who suffer. This is a huge topic, I recognize, that there are people who suffer for the generation. There are people who suffer who have not done a specific thing, that is because they used this finger to get, to do something wrong, their finger gets hurt. It's not always that kind of relationship. And it's really important to understand that for some people, and they talk about this a lot in the Zohar, there are people who are sick because their soul is weakened, pining for God. That's a whole other level. What does it mean that we live in a world where we can't see and appreciate and have the closeness that we want with that spiritual bliss that our soul is looking for? Now, I'm going to let you read this another time about the Baal Shem Tov and his stories. Okay, it's very interesting. And this is what I was telling you. The main thing is faith. And I'm going to explain this after. Every person must search within himself and strengthen himself in faith, for there are people suffering from the most terrible afflictions. And the only reason they're ill is because of the collapse of faith. I'm going to say something that's not in these sources, which is the same way that the midah of pride is written in Pirkei Avot to be an underpinning of all of the other negative midot. Faith or emunah is connected with joy, and it is the underpinning of all of the midot associated with faith. With health. So if you had to do one thing, you would want to concentrate on experiencing a deep knowingness and a deep gratitude that there is good happening to you, and there is good happening from a God who cares for you. And in the Hasidic traditions, one of the ways to express emunah or joy is dancing. Another is singing. And we see this throughout Tehillim, right? Sing a new song, dance, rina, kol rina. I don't even have to say the myriad of sources, but that's what Avram Greenbaum wrote. I didn't write it down here. It's so humble what he said. He said, who would think 100 years ago, especially 150 years ago in the Enlightenment, that the cure for disease in the time when doctors were finally had the instruments to understand how to treat things in modern science, that the cure would be dancing and singing, right? And all of these things. The mitzvah of dancing at Simchat Torah is a mitzvah of the whole body, and it's associated in the healing texts with the heart being healed, because when you move your legs, the circulation pumps, and you're moving in a way that expresses your knowingness and expresses your joy, and the heart becomes happy. So it's just an example of how all of these levels connect, and that's for Dalia. The idea of the mitzvah of dancing in the Torah, how you literally move your body, how it affects your mood and affects your health and circulation. So it's a very integrated approach. So let's see what the Lubavitcher Rebbe had to say, because he's the most modern source we have, and we know that he healed. Anybody you know, any one of us knows somebody who personally knows somebody who was healed by the Rebbe, one way or the other. But he was also a very practical man and an engineer and a scientist. So what does he have to say? Start with a good doctor. And the precursor to that is take care of your health. But when you can't do what you need to do, follow a good doctor. Then dispel any thoughts about illness. Think only healthy thoughts. And perhaps in here, this formula is for you, Mr. Parker, and Dahlia, and everybody else, and Morris. Dispel thoughts, not dispel negative thoughts or thoughts about illness in the sense that you can't think about it. But when you have an illness, God forbid, it's written by some of the modern medical people dealing with cancer, and this is a big part of my practice before. The art of getting better when you're fighting cancer is how you live between the tests. What do you do between the time you go for a b'dika, they go to do a test, and you get the results? How are you living in the days in between? What are you doing with yourself? What's the state of your body? What actions are you taking? Because if you're thinking about the illness all the time, you're actually influencing your body. You're setting off neurotransmitters, circulatory issues, mood, thought, nutrition, sleep cycle. So when the Rebbe says dispel any thoughts about illness, it's not don't process things, but you cannot stay there. You cannot let a thought turn into a state, turn into a mood, turn into a trait. Are you following that? So you have to do the reverse. Think only healthy thoughts is not what they call toxic positivity, right? It's not saying you may only be positive. It's saying train yourself. be an active agent. Understand that you have a power in how you can think. And our current best practices in psychotherapy involve disrupting bad thoughts. There's literally dialectical behavior therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, where you have to stop and say, this is my thought. Am I going to accept it, modify it, or throw it away? Not, it's a thought, so I have to follow it. We don't do that anymore. We know more now that we don't need to do that. The third thing, strengthen your confidence in the healer of all flesh, that he will heal you in whatever way he sees fit, where healing is more than, as Morris put it, the physical ailment. And I just want to stop here. I'll say increase your study of the inner light of Torah. What does that mean? What does that mean? It means that there's a luminosity inside of the Torah, that same luminosity that enervates your whole body and all of your limbs. Go find it. Be interested in something that shows you an inner aspect of how to be confident that God is there, how to be confident, how to be excited that the cosmos are working in a certain way. There's an inner light there that actually infuses you on top of the thoughts. So go get it, right? Go find it. And you don't have to work very hard, thanks to Shari Shemaim and all the programs they create. You just have to show up. There was a time where you had to fight with a sword and risk your life. And I'm talking to me also. We should take avail of all of the wonderful things we have. I want to stop here for a minute because we've said a lot. And I want to invite you to have a look at this. It's like one summative thing that I wrote. The path of Torah and mitzvot leads beyond the physical world to the ultimate joy of genuine connection with God. And it is this spiritual fulfillment that is the true guarantor of health, giving immunity against the physical excesses, the lack of balance, the loss of meaning and purpose, the depression and despair that lie at the root of so many diseases. Ultimately, Jewish sources encourage people to take their lives in hand and actualize their latent spiritual powers to play an active role in their own healing process. Okay. So here is it written down, some of the things that I was able to collate, where there is an overlap. Now, I could have written positive thinking, but that's just too general. These are scientifically the most popular things right now with the strongest results. Reflective journaling is a best practice. Gratitude practice, meditation and exercise. And the actual key here, by the way, meditation, I believe it's 10 minutes, 3 times a week. To see the benefits, and exercise is 20 minutes, 3 times a week. Like there's certain key numbers that are involved. Gratitude practice is a lot more forgiving. I'm just plugging in my computer. Gratitude practice can be 1 to 2 minutes a night. And people who practice noticing something positive about their day before they go to sleep are known to have up to more than 50% reduction in inflammation and other major markers. Now, what's going on and why did they call it Shavua Shel, what is it, Hoda'ah, I guess, in Hebrew, gratitude week?
But the idea remains the same.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a second, because what we've learned is that living in future states, and that goes against living in past states, right? So what's the role of living in past states? To remember so it won't happen again. And I believe that the idea of commemoration, again, we know now a little bit more about our brain than people who set those things up may not have realized that if we did it one time and process the relevance of it one time for a limited amount of time, it was helpful in framing and motivating us to live differently or to never forget, or whatever the the idea may be. However, as time went by, I'm going to presume that we know more now, that our identity can be resilience. It can be not just we survived, but who do we want to be? And we live in a day and age where we have that luxury. We're not only surviving, and all of this writing, all of this stuff, everything, every single thing I'm looking at here when I think of the scientific research behind of it talks about moving from survival into flourishing. We've never lived in an age where we had enough food like this, where we had enough freedom to talk about these things, where we had enough scientific knowledge. It's a gift that we have now to know better. That's my answer to your question. That would be my comment on your question, is that no, we know that we can literally create future states, and that upregulates our nervous system. What does it mean to upregulate your nervous system? To actually change it by teaching your body that you're already in a positive state, because gratitude, as Dr. Joe Dispenza puts it, is the ultimate form of receivership. Why? Because in order to be in gratitude, you're already looking back at a future well-lived. Does that make sense? Understand how, no?
No,
If
no.
I'm grateful for
No idea what
something,
that means.
if I'm grateful for something, when did it happen?
In the past. not the
Okay.
future.
So I can manipulate my health in a good way by conditioning my body to follow my mental thinking around gratitude. So if I'm in a state of gratitude, my body is thinking something great happened. So you can do training, and this is what people are doing now with gratitude practice. They realize that being in a state of being grateful for something that happened teaches our body how to be in that state more often, and we begin anticipating that positive things will happen. And why is inflammation going down? Because our body's anticipating, instead of being stressed, it's being relaxed. Instead of secreting cortisol or producing, or whatever you want to say, releasing cortisol, it can start releasing endorphins or serotonin. And there is amazing research coming out now about how targeted practice of states that you want to be in already triggers your body to produce the neurotransmitters and the chemicals as if. And we know that from imagery studies going back. We know that already, that PET scans of somebody who is told that he's standing in the snow, he may react as if it's cold in the room. Right, Dr. Moskovich? We know from PET scans that people who are induced in imagery can have the same effect as if it was really happening. Correct? Correct. So we can do that ourselves. A person who, I work with people who have depression, and I do dementia coaching, and I work with people and I say to them, I know that you are thinking about all the negative things that are happening to you, but you can practice being in a state more often, and even 3 times a day, like you would take a pill. You can practice the art of being in a state of joy or gratitude, and it works. And it works. So upregulating the nervous system and body systems is simply going ahead of something that hasn't happened already to create those improvements. So it's anticipating a future. And in doing so, you create it.
Shoshana,
Isn't that what we do? Yes, go ahead.
sorry, I'm listening to you sort of talk about the modern scientific knowledge that reinforces or points the way towards some of these things that we also find in other forms in Jewish sources. And because I think that we all have an instinctive respect for modern science. And I think that's helpful in that way. It makes me really resist the Chizkiyahu story.
Mm,
As a modern reader, I kind of instinctively must say to myself, well, that must be figurative. I can't sort of handle the notion that there was a literal, availability of medical cures that the greatest person in the generation discarded, not just for his generation, but for many generations to come, in order to produce better connection with God. I mean, I can see the value in that as a sort of figurative or symbolic story about a concept,
yeah.
but I can't bring and this may be my modern scientism, but I can't bring myself to accept it as a literal account of history, because that would be, that would feel too awful, I think.
Yeah.
And
I hear you.
so I'm just,
And I think we have the luxury of treating it as a symbolic story. And I think that's the same with Rabbi Nachman, the fact that we will never know what actually happened. We can treat it as his. Yeah, I hear you loud and clear.
another just thing that occurred to me along the way is that there are various ways in which you come at the idea of having a positive vision of wellness rather than just an absence of illness.
Mhm.
And it reminded me a lot. It's been years since I read this, so I hope I'm not misrepresenting it, but it reminded me of Virginia Woolf's essay on pacifism during an air raid, or peace during an air raid. I'm trying to remember the exact title. But she's, she's speaking from her vantage point in World War I as a pacifist, and talking about the notion of peace as more than ceasefire, and that we need to have a positive vision of what peace is if people are going to rally behind pacifism, that it's more than the absence of war. And I think that these best practices that you're getting at are more than just about instantiating a habit of gratitude or reflection. They're also about giving yourself a vehicle to develop that positive vision of what wellness is.
And begin to rehearse it.
Yeah.
Right? So the reflection is in journaling, it's this happened to me, you process it, and then you're ready to move beyond it. Okay, let me ask a question. It is almost 9 o'clock. Can I please have a show of hands here, or whatever it is, or come off mute and let me know? Do you want to have do an exercise or two that would take 15 to 20 minutes? Or would you like me to wrap up?
I'm too tired for an exercise, but maybe other people want to stay on.
Okay. Well, you can always start off the exercise and see if you get energized, and if not, just click it off, right? It might energize you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah. But I just want to know, what about your timing, Tehillah and Zahava? Should we?
Mine, oh, I thought this ends at 9, but I don't speak on behalf of the group.
I do have to get to Shabbos cooking, so I apologize. I don't have too much time budgeted.
Very good. So what does that mean? 5 minutes, 0 minutes, 10 minutes? Just put in the chat quickly, right? What your ideal
I
is.
can hang out for an extra 5 or so, but I can't commit to mental presence beyond that.
Okay.
5.
5. Okay, 5. So Tehillah, what is it that you would like to ask?
I wanted to hear about how taking agency in your own healing connects to the stories that we brought in earlier about faith. Like, I think I mostly see the connection, but I'd love your help in the sense that we have this idea of wanting to restore this relationship by getting rid of the Sefer Trufot, because people are thinking about their health and connecting with God, and it's not just automatic. And I see that with these gratitude practices and meditation and positive thinking, there's a form of engagement with our health but I want to hear more about the relational aspect and the God aspect, and if there's like a Jewish perspective that enriches how we approach our health over and above, reading best practices written about gratitude by someone without necessarily a Jewish perspective. And I apologize if that's a big question. It was
Of course, it's a
not
big
that long in my
question,
head
and
when I
it's a-
started it, when I first posed it.
It's a big question. It's a good question. And I think I'd rather show you the answer, actually. Let's do something together. I want you to walk away with a lived experience of what we're talking about here. If I ask you right now to think of the last time you felt your heart actually expand in your chest because of love that you felt for somebody, can you picture that moment? And even if it helps you to close your eyes to imagine it, can you picture a moment where your heart just grew? I had one the other day when I was waking up my son. And when I think about it, my chest expands and I breathe in and I open up and something relaxes in me. How about the rest of you? Come off camera and tell me, was there a time recently that you had? And more importantly, if you actually tap into your body right now, what are some of the other sensations in your body that you felt at that moment?
I'm going to call it baby therapy.
Mm-hmm. And what is baby therapy? Where does it live in your body? What happens? Describe the physiological state in 2 or 3 words.
Wow, deep breathing. Well, I don't know, relaxation.
Okay, amazing. Who else?
I think there's sort of an involuntary smiling thing that, that if you tap into the right memory, then you'll find yourself smiling at no one.
Right.
And sort of what that does, not just on your face, but sort of to your shoulders and your posture at the same time. And that there's a sort
Okay,
of
shoulders, posture, and involuntary smiling. How about you, Morris? You're muted. Yeah, go ahead.
Involuntary smiling in the sense of, for sure, but just a sense of overflowing, just expansive.
Expansive. Yeah.
And feeling sort of not just expansive within me, but feeling expansive with the rest of my surroundings.
Aha. So it's not just in you, because it's literally your neshama is doing something, and your body extends beyond you when it's love. It's a fact. It's a fact. Heart coherence, when it's measured in machines, is very big. It goes very far. So good for you for noticing that. So I just wanted to say, with that little exercise, I didn't hear from the Parkers, who look like they're falling asleep here, but for very good reason. And Dahlia, how tired are you right now? I just need to ask.
No, I was
Dahlia.
just thinking when I saw my latest grandchild for the first time, and how, you realize that it doesn't matter that she's number 14, that you're just as excited about her as I was about all the other ones.
Where does that excitement live? What does it feel like in your body? I want to know.
Well, first of all,
was it?
involuntary smiling, where you just
Yeah.
can't stop smiling.
Yeah.
And, if you see pictures of me holding her for the first time, you'll just see this exuberance.
Exuberance.
That's like, very much like Morris described, this overflowing
Yeah.
and gratefulness that just
Gratitude.
seems to extend out of your body. Yeah.
Well, I highly recommend actually reproducing that feeling several times a day. It's better than the best medicine known to earth, to humankind. Please go ahead, Parkers.
Okay, what I want to say is, in the morning, getting everyone out the door is hectic and you're not really thinking, of gratitude. But my phone every day likes to remind me of my past memories, like it puts together memories. And anyway, so taking like 2 seconds to just click on that after all the craziness of the morning it sort of makes me pause and smile and realize, okay, like there's a, you're thinking and you're making and being like grateful for, your kids and your family or whoever's in your photo, and, for sort of forgetting about all the craziness of what happened in the morning. It sort of resets your day.
Amazing. Okay, so Tehillah, to add to the comment, because the time, to respect everybody's time, is that actively looking for situations, being an active agent in seeking out and reproducing situations that positively affect experience, state, mood, trait, or midot. And emunah is one of them. Emunah is not a passive thing. It's not. If we just have whatever level of faith we have, that's one thing. But if we seek out greater levels of faith, and if we actually pay attention to what's going on around us in order to, the Rebbe talks about, increase confidence. So look for reasons to be confident that you're being cared for. That's what emunah is. So I want to be respectful. I'm happy that we did this. I'm so happy that everybody made it their own. And I'm also yearning to do part 2, where I can show you what it's like to do an image that takes 10 or 20 minutes and have you experience what I wanted to have you experience, is that your higher wisdom and your brain and your neshama's wisdom can come through if you use the world of symbols. And it's very, very interesting and wonderful to see. If you're in the right state of mind, and I'm not talking about a meditative trance, but if you're in the right state of mind, you can ask yourself questions, if it's in the world of stories, that get past your defenses and hear a lot of wisdom and a lot of beauty. So anybody want to say any closing comments? I want to express my gratitude. I know that this was a humongous topic, but I'm so grateful that you gave me a chance to try and share something small about it.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it very much.
Good. I hope that the last 8 minutes were not too tiring. You seem to be more energized than before. And I knew you would be. That's why I asked you to stick around.
I want to say thank you on behalf of Shari Shemaim. You have carried us into Rosh Chodesh, which I think is lovely. So very much appreciated. I think also heading into Tazria Mitzorah for the Parsha this week, which is like a physical manifestation of potentially a spiritual problem. I think it's also very timely. So thank you so much. This was really, really astounding. And I'm really happy that we all have access to the source sheet, so that even though we weren't able to do the practices together, we're all able to do them independently. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for alerting me to your lecture.
Me too.
Thank you so much for coming. And it's good that I didn't have a chance to get nervous that you were coming, Morris, because I could have done that. Inviting you at 1 minute to 8 was the trick.
Just a quick, and I wanted to say before, just very fast. Rabbi Novak has a son who's a neurosurgeon, and he told us that he a bracha before he begins any surgery, asking God to help him with it. He never sees himself as this person who's doing this, but he sees himself as an agent.
That's right. That's right. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I know that Max, who's smiling into the camera over there, told me a similar story that comes from Rebbetzin Henny Machlis and her interactions with doctors during her terminal, the cancer that took her life in the end. She had a lot to say, and she gave tochacha, she gave rebuke to any doctor who would come near her and not know that. She wanted to make sure everybody was fully aware who was in charge and who was really performing the surgery. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, Tazria Mitzorah, it's on the source sheet.
Oh, Thank you so much. Chodesh Tov, everybody.
Chodesh Tov u'Mevorach. Good night, everyone. Good night. Good Shabbos.
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank
Chodesh
you.
Tov.
Chodesh Tov.